Good morning. Today we're going to do social science, grade 7E, term 2, history. The continuation, we've done unit 1, 2 and 3. We are going to do unit 4 and 5. I am Rosie Miller and I'm at VTA School van der Bijl Park. Unit 4, the impact of transatlantic slave trade on slaves. Unit 5, the impact of the transatlantic slave trade on the economies. Unit 4. The impact of transatlantic slave trade on slaves. What was it like to be a plantation slave in American South? Plantations were huge farms in America. The slaves worked inside houses and out of harsh weather. Some slaves worked very hard in the fields from sunrise to sunset 6 days a week. They were looked after by the overseers with whips in their hands. Slaves had no rights and very few possessions. Slave masters gave slaves new names and branded their bodies. They were allowed to be Christians, but not allowed to practice their religion. No drums were allowed in case they sent messengers to organize rebellions. Slaves were punished if they talked back to the masters or did not work hard enough or were involved in a fight. Slave punishments were being whipped, placed in chains, put into small cage with bread and water for a few days, and they were forced to wear a metal collar. You'll see the pictures attached for each of those punishments. Rebellion against slavery. Nat Turner's revolt. He was a slave that could read and write, had religious visions and preached against slavery from the Bible. In 1831, he led a rebellion against slavery. After Nat's revolt, people became alarmed, hysterical and fearful. Armed mobs killed innocent slaves. Laws were passed making it illegal for slaves to meet without a white minister present. It became illegal to teach slaves to read and write. Joseph Sink and the Amistad Mutiny, 1839. In 1839, a Spanish slave ship called the Amistad went to America. Joseph freed himself and other slaves and left the ship stranded. The Underground Railroad. A secret route called the Underground Railway was started to help runaway slaves to be free because slavery did not exist there. Whites who were against slavery let the slaves use their homes as safe shelters called stations, and they lit candles to show the runaways that a house was a station. Runaway slaves were called passengers, and the people who led them along roads and forests were called conductors. Here's a picture of Joseph Sink and the Amistad ship that he used to free himself and slaves. Harriet Tubman. She was a slave who escaped to freedom and helped other slaves to escape. She was nicknamed Moses because she brought over 300 slaves to freedom. She carried a gun for protection against slave catchers and dogs. Harriet stood up for the rights of women. She died at the age of 93, and today are many books and memorials that honor her life. John Brown. He was a friend of Harriet Tubman and wanted to end slavery through violence. His sons were killed and his house burnt down. He was hanged for treason and became a noble martyr. The soldiers wanted to remember him and wrote a song about him. As you see, there's a picture of Harriet Tubman when I crossed that line to freedom. And then there's a picture of John Brown. They were very great friends and both fought for freedom of the slaves. Our last unit 5, the impact of transatlantic slave trade on the economies. The transatlantic slave trade was a triangular system in which goods were transported by ship between 3 countries. Slave labor made the farmers wealthy. The negative effect of slave trade was it caused racism, job loss, political instability, crimes were not punished, so they got sold as slaves. A slave ship owner, they own a ship to transport slaves. A slave ship trader, they bought and sold slaves. That's the end. Hope you enjoyed this lesson. Here we have VTA's links YouTube, Facebook, school website, telephone numbers to contact, and our email address. And don't forget the D6 communicator. If you have any queries or you want to know anything about the schoolwork, please feel free to use these links. Thank you and enjoy. We are finished grade 7Es with history for term 2. Now we're going to start doing revision and start planning for studies.